What does it mean when the teacher says that you should use a wide range of complex grammatical forms to get a good C1 mark? Well, in the next 4 videos, I'm going to give you clear examples of how to do that to show off your C1 level. We are starting today with the passive voice. We are going to explain why we use it, how we use it, and when we use it with examples that you can use in your own writing. So the main point of the passive is when we are not focused on the subject of the sentence, the person doing it, which is very good for essays because we don't want to use so much first and second person. We're trying to present an objective and impersonal take on something. And instead, we're focusing on the object or the action itself. Maybe I can explain this more clearly with an example of writing that a student might write in their essay. If we are talking about shopping habits, I want to mention the impact of apps on shopping habits. Well, okay, but I don't really want to hear what little Paula from Barcelona has to say. I want the objective viewpoint. So maybe it makes more sense, it's more appropriate in the register of an essay to say the impact of apps on shopping habits should be mentioned. It sounds a bit better because we don't need to know about you as an individual person. We want a more objective and impersonal view on it. So that's why. Then how do we do this? What is the formula for using the passive correctly and effectively? Well, we're going to start with an active sentence because this is much more common in English. And then we're going to transform it to passive so you can think about how to formulate your own passive sentences. So in my active sentence, I've got a lecture describing some marketing techniques. I've got a subject, his lecture, a verb, describe, and an object, various marketing techniques used to promote the film. We could maybe divide this down into more technical points, but for passive, all you need to do is identify the subject, the verb, and the object. If you can understand that, you can make a correct passive sentence. The first thing we're going to do is move the object to the front of the sentence because we are more focused on this object and the action of what's happening than the person doing it. So you can see it hasn't changed at all. It's just moved to the front of the sentence. Then we're going to need the verb to be. It's always to be in a passive sentence. Try and give me a passive sentence without to be. Doesn't exist. Where you need to be a bit careful is using it in the correct tense and the correct person. We get that information from our first sentence. So because we are describing marketing techniques, plural, and his lecture described them in the past tense, plural of to be is were. The marketing techniques were. Now we need the past participle of our verb. What happened to these marketing techniques? They were described. This is the past participle, isn't it? Not the past simple, which sometimes can be different depending on the verb. Choose, chose, chosen. Right? An apple was chosen. I chose an apple was chosen. So be a bit careful because it can be different. And then the final optional point, this is where you need to be a bit smart with your context. Do we need to say who did it? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends on what sounds good. Here it maybe makes sense to say the marketing techniques were described by his lecture. So we've got an active sentence transformed to a passive sentence for the reasons we said before. Can you do it in an essay? What I've got here is some sentences from a previous video of mine where I went through the top 10 C1 essay topics. These are possible sentences that could be used in C1 essays. At the moment, they are active sentences, so I think they could be slightly improved if they were transformed to passive sentences, which is your job now. Pause the video, transform them to passive using the technique that we just looked at. You should have something like, well, we often use technology, subject, verb, object. Technology is often used. We can say by students, I consider that optional. People can reduce their CO2 emissions. CO2 emissions can be reduced. We could say people's CO2 emissions, and that becomes the new object. That would be a nice way of doing it. Teachers should encourage students. Students should be encouraged by teachers. And this is where it's interesting to consider. This is why maybe the passive makes more sense sometimes. Because if you think, well, it's not just teachers encouraging students, is it? It's also parents and the media and role models. And this is why now I don't have to worry about saying teachers and parents and I can just say students should be encouraged in general, because it's the students that are more important than the teachers in this sentence. That's why we're using the passive. And our final one, we have a more general one, a slightly different one, because I'm trying to show you all the uses of passive here. You might have struggled if you're using the same formula here, because you can do this a little bit different, but the best way of doing this is with the structure, it is said that. Okay, it is often widely commonly said that, but the point is it is said that, it is thought that, it is believed that is another use of the passive. We could, of course, also say sport is said to, or sport is believed to, sport is thought to. That's the other way of doing it. That's still a passive, and it's great if you can use that in your writing as well. Right, final point then. Let's put all of this into practice with your homework. Here is a possible C1 essay topic about having children, because I've just had my second child. So this is our topic for today that I wrote. And it's about encouraging people to have children. It's a bit of a weird C1 topic, but I can imagine this on the C1 exam. As you know, you have to discuss 2 of them and then decide which one is most important. And the real focus here is on using the passive as much as possible in this essay. Your homework is to use one passive structure in each of the 4 paragraphs: introduction, 2 discussion points, conclusion. Here's a possible way of doing it. In our introduction, the government must make an effort to allow people the chance to have children. The government must make an effort. Subject, verb, object. How do we transform that to passive? That could be a slightly more, again, impersonal, objective way of introducing your essay. So that's why we'd use the passive. Talking about paternity and maternity leave, parents take paternity leave. The leave is taken. We get what we're doing here to make it more passive. We could do the same for the discounts. Discounts should be, and in conclusion, the first few months are. So I believe generous maternity and maternity leave is most important. Right, hope that was useful. Write your essay, your homework, and come back next week for more. Bye.